I was wiping down the last table at Murphy's Diner when I heard it, a small voice cutting through the evening quiet like a knife. "Why doesn't my daddy love me?" The words hit me harder than they should have. Spoken by a little girl who couldn't have been more than 7, sitting alone in the corner booth with tears streaming down her cheeks. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Her mother was at the counter, head buried in her hands, shoulders shaking with exhaustion and defeat. In that moment, I knew I couldn't just walk away and pretend I hadn't heard the question that every child should never have to ask. The rain had been falling steadily for 3 days in Riverside, Oregon, turning the streets into rivers and keeping most folks indoors. Tomas Mitchell finished his evening shift at Murphy's Diner with the familiar ache in his back and the satisfaction of another honest day's work. At 34, he had grown accustomed to the rhythm of small-town life, early mornings prepping vegetables, long hours over hot grills, and evenings spent helping his 8-year-old daughter Sophie with homework in their modest 2-bedroom apartment above the hardware store. The diner had been unusually quiet that Tuesday evening, with only a handful of customers seeking refuge from the persistent downpour. Mrs. Henderson had come in for her usual coffee and apple pie, complaining about her arthritis. Old Pete had nursed a cup of black coffee for 2 hours while reading the same newspaper page 3 times. The Wilson family had stopped by after their youngest son's soccer practice, filling the place with the kind of cheerful chaos that reminded Tomas why he loved working around families, even when his own felt incomplete. It was nearly closing time when Lisa Crawford pushed through the glass door, her umbrella dripping and her expression carrying the weight of someone who had reached the end of their rope. Tomas recognized her from the apartment complex where they both lived. She worked double shifts at the local medical clinic and raised her daughter Emma alone. He had seen them together in the hallway, noticed how Lisa always looked tired but tried to smile for her little girl's sake. Lisa chose the corner booth, the one with the torn vinyl seat that regulars avoided but newcomers didn't notice until it was too late. Emma slid in across from her mother, her blonde hair still damp from the rain and her school backpack clutched against her chest like armor. Tomas brought them menus, noting the way Lisa's hands trembled slightly as she accepted them, and how Emma's eyes seemed too old for her young face. The conversation at their table started quietly, but even from across the diner, Tomas could sense the tension building. He had developed an instinct for reading customers over his years in food service, who needed space, who wanted to talk, who was dealing with something heavy. The Crawford women fell into that last category, their voices gradually rising as whatever discussion they were having reached a breaking point. That's when Emma's question shattered the evening calm, her small voice carrying across the empty diner with devastating clarity. "Why doesn't my daddy love me?" The words hung in the air like an accusation against the universe itself, followed by Lisa's strangled sob and the sound of a 7-year-old heartbreaking in real time. Tomas froze with a coffee pot in his hand, watching as Emma's tears began to fall and Lisa reached across the table with helpless desperation. Tomas set the coffee pot down and found himself walking toward their table before his mind had fully processed the decision. Something about Emma's raw pain had bypassed every social barrier he normally maintained with customers. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. He had heard that same question echo in his own daughter's voice during the long nights after her mother had packed her bags and disappeared into the Seattle fog, leaving behind only a note about needing to find herself and promises that never materialized into phone calls or birthday cards. "Excuse me," Tomas said softly, approaching their booth with the careful movements of someone who understood that broken hearts required gentle handling. "I'm sorry, I couldn't help but overhear. Would it be okay if I sat down for just a minute?" Lisa looked up with red-rimmed eyes, clearly embarrassed that their private conversation had spilled into public space. She started to shake her head, but something in Tomas's expression must have conveyed genuine concern rather than idle curiosity. "I don't know," she whispered, glancing at Emma, who had buried her face in her arms on the table. "We're kind of in the middle of something." "I understand," Tomas replied, pulling out his wallet and showing Lisa a small photograph tucked behind his driver's license. It showed a younger version of himself with Sophie when she was Emma's age, both of them wearing forced smiles at what was obviously a father-daughter event. My little girl asked me the same question about her mom 3 years ago. If you don't mind me saying, sometimes it helps when someone who's been there offers a different perspective. Emma lifted her head slightly, her tear-stained cheeks reflecting the diner's fluorescent lights. Her eyes held the kind of wariness that children develop when adults have repeatedly disappointed them, but also a flicker of curiosity about this stranger who claimed to understand her pain. Lisa studied Tomas's face for a long moment, perhaps recognizing something in his expression that convinced her he wasn't just another well-meaning adult with empty platitudes. "Okay," Lisa said finally, sliding over to make room. "Just for a minute." Tomas sat down, immediately aware of how small Emma seemed in the large booth and how exhausted Lisa appeared up close. The fluorescent light revealed details that distance had hidden: the careful way Lisa had mended a small tear in Emma's jacket, the fact that both of them were wearing shoes that had seen better days but were meticulously clean, the stack of medical bills partially visible in Lisa's purse. These were people who took care of what they had, even when what they had wasn't much. "What's your name?" Tomas asked Emma gently. "Emma," she replied in a voice barely above a whisper, not quite ready to trust but not completely closed off either. "That's a beautiful name. I'm Tomas, and I work here in the kitchen. I make the pancakes that smell really good on Sunday mornings." He saw the tiniest hint of interest cross Emma's face at the mention of pancakes. "Emma, can I tell you something that might sound a little strange at first?" Emma nodded cautiously while Lisa watched with the protective intensity of a mother ready to intervene if this conversation took a wrong turn. "When my daughter Sophie asked me why her mommy didn't love her enough to stay, I realized something important," Tomas continued, his voice steady despite the difficulty of revisiting those memories. "Sometimes the problem isn't that we're not lovable. Sometimes the problem is that some grown-ups haven't learned how to love properly yet. It's like they're missing a piece inside that makes love work the way it's supposed to." Emma's brow furrowed as she processed this concept. "Like when my tablet doesn't work because the battery is broken?" "Exactly like that," Tomas said, surprised by how quickly she had grasped the analogy. "Your tablet is perfectly good, but if the battery doesn't work, the tablet can't do what it's supposed to do. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the tablet." Lisa's breath caught audibly, and Tomas could see her struggling with emotions that went far beyond this single conversation. "But how do you explain that to a 7-year-old who just wants her father to call her back?" Lisa asked, her voice cracking. "How do you make sense of a man who promised to be different than his own father was, but then just vanishes when things get hard?" Tomas felt the familiar anger that rose whenever he encountered parents who abandoned their responsibilities, but he kept his voice calm for Emma's sake. "You can't make sense of it," he admitted, "and you shouldn't have to. But what you can do is help Emma understand that his choices don't define her worth." "But it hurts so much," Emma said, fresh tears beginning to flow. "When I see other kids with their daddies at school, I wonder what's wrong with me that mine doesn't want to be there." The raw honesty in her voice made Tomas's chest tighten. He remembered Sophie saying almost identical words, remembered the helpless rage he had felt at his inability to fix something that should never have been broken in the first place. But he had learned something important in the years since then, something that might help this little girl who was fighting the same battle his daughter had faced. "Emma, look at me for a second," Tomas said, waiting until she met his eyes. "I want you to think about your favorite teacher at school. Do you have one?" "Mrs. Peterson," Emma replied without hesitation. "She teaches 2nd grade, and she always smells like vanilla, and she remembers everyone's birthday." "Perfect. Now, if Mrs. Peterson forgot to water the plants in your classroom and they died, would that mean the plants were bad plants?" Emma shook her head immediately. "No, that would mean Mrs. Peterson forgot to take care of them." "Right. And if your daddy doesn't call you or visit, that doesn't mean you're not worth calling or visiting. It means he's forgetting to take care of something really, really important. But just like those plants would still be good plants even if nobody watered them, you're still an amazing little girl even if your daddy isn't taking care of your relationship the way he should." Lisa reached across the table and took Emma's small hand in hers. "Tomas is right, sweetheart. Daddy's choices are about things going on inside him that have nothing to do with how wonderful you are." "But why can't he just fix those things?" Emma asked with the logical simplicity that children brought to adult problems. If his inside parts are broken, why doesn't he go to the doctor like when I had strep throat? The question hung in the air, highlighting the fundamental tragedy of emotional neglect, that, unlike physical ailments, psychological wounds often went untreated, because the people carrying them either didn't recognize the damage or couldn't admit they needed help. Tomas found himself thinking about his ex-wife, wondering if she had ever sought the help she clearly needed, or if she was still running from responsibilities that felt too overwhelming to face. Sometimes grown-ups are scared to admit they need help, Tomas explained carefully. They think asking for help means they're weak, so they just keep pretending everything is fine, even when it's not. And sometimes they hurt the people they love most because they're too scared to face their own problems. That's stupid, Emma declared with the blunt honesty that made children such effective truth-tellers. Yeah, Tomas agreed, unable to suppress a small smile. It really is stupid. For the first time that evening, Emma's expression lightened slightly, as if having an adult validate her assessment of the situation had given her permission to feel angry instead of just sad. Lisa squeezed her daughter's hand, and Tomas could see some of the crushing guilt beginning to lift from her shoulders as she realized that maybe, just maybe, there were ways to help Emma process this abandonment without taking all the blame upon herself. The conversation had shifted something fundamental in the small booth, creating a space where painful truths could be acknowledged without destroying hope entirely. Emma was still hurt, Lisa was still struggling, but they were no longer carrying their burdens completely alone. Sometimes, Tomas reflected, that was how healing began, not with grand gestures or perfect solutions, but with the simple recognition that pain shared was pain diminished, and that understanding could flourish even in the most unlikely circumstances. The weeks following that evening at Murphy's Diner brought unexpected changes to Tomas's carefully structured routine. Emma had begun appearing at the community playground behind their apartment complex every afternoon after school, always alone, always carrying the same worn purple backpack that seemed too large for her small frame. From his kitchen window, Tomas could see her sitting on the swings, not actually swinging, but just moving back and forth slightly, while staring at the ground with the contemplative expression of someone far older than her 7 years. Sophie had noticed Emma too, asking questions about the sad girl who never seemed to play with the other children. "Why doesn't she use the slide, Daddy?" Sophie had asked one Thursday evening as they prepared dinner together. "And why does she always look like she's waiting for someone who never comes?" The observation struck Tomas with its accuracy. Emma did look like she was waiting. Hope and disappointment warring in her posture every afternoon until Lisa's tired voice would call from their second-floor window, summoning her daughter home for dinner and homework. It reminded Tomas uncomfortably of his own daughter during those first months after her mother's departure, when Sophie would position herself by their front window every evening, convinced that today would be the day her mother remembered where she belonged. By the third week of this routine, Tomas found himself making excuses to walk past the playground during Emma's solitary visits. He told himself he was just being a concerned neighbor, but the truth was more complex. Something about Emma's quiet resilience had awakened his protective instincts, the same ones that had driven him to master single parenthood through sheer determination and love, when conventional wisdom suggested he wasn't equipped for the task. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday afternoon when Emma's backpack split open, spilling books and papers across the playground gravel. Tomas was returning from the grocery store and watched as she frantically tried to gather her scattered belongings before the wind could carry them away. Without thinking, he set down his bags and jogged over to help, catching her math worksheet just before it sailed over the fence. "Thank you," Emma said quietly, accepting the rescued paper with the careful politeness of a child who had been taught good manners despite her family's struggles. Up close, Tomas could see that she had been crying recently, though she had clearly tried to hide the evidence. "Rough day at school?" he asked gently, helping her stack her books in order. Emma shrugged with the studied nonchalance that children used when they didn't want to burden adults with their problems. Marcus told everyone that kids whose dads don't want them are probably bad kids. He said that's why his mom told him not to play with me anymore. The casual cruelty of childhood social dynamics never failed to amaze Tomas. 7-year-olds could deliver devastating psychological blows with the innocent brutality of people who hadn't yet learned to disguise their prejudices with politeness. "Marcus sounds like he doesn't understand how families work," Tomas replied carefully. Sometimes the smartest, kindest, most amazing kids have parents who are dealing with their own problems. That's what you told me at the restaurant, Emma said, sitting down on the swing and looking at him with eyes that seemed to be evaluating whether his words held any real truth or were just adult comfort with no substance behind them. I meant it then, and I mean it now, Tomas said, taking the swing next to hers. Want to know a secret about Marcus and kids like him? Emma nodded, leaning forward with the first genuine curiosity she had shown. Kids who say mean things about other people's families usually do it because they're scared something might be wrong with their own family too. When you're really confident that you're loved and safe, you don't need to make other people feel bad to feel good about yourself. This concept clearly required some processing. Emma pushed herself gently back and forth on the swing while working through the implications. So Marcus is mean to me because he's scared his daddy might leave too? Maybe, Tomas said. Or maybe he's just repeating things he's heard adults say without really understanding what they mean. Either way, it doesn't make what he said okay, and it definitely doesn't make what he said true. My mom cries a lot when she thinks I'm sleeping, Emma said suddenly, the words tumbling out as if they had been stored up for weeks waiting for a safe person to hear them. She tries to be quiet, but our walls are thin and I can hear her through the door. Sometimes she talks on the phone to my grandma and says she doesn't know how she's going to pay for things, and that she wishes she had never trusted my dad when he promised he would help take care of us. The revelation hit Tomas like a physical blow. He had suspected that Lisa was struggling financially, but hearing the details through Emma's innocent recounting made the family situation feel both more real and more urgent. That must be scary to hear, he said carefully, not wanting to minimize Emma's feelings while also being mindful of her loyalty to her mother. I try to be extra good so she won't have to worry about me too, Emma continued. I don't ask for things at the store, and I eat all my vegetables even when they taste yucky, and I never complain when we have peanut butter sandwiches for dinner 3 days in a row. The image of this small girl shouldering adult responsibilities broke something inside Tomas's chest. He remembered Sophie going through a similar phase, trying to be perfect to prevent any additional stress that might drive her father away too. Children weren't meant to carry such burdens, but life had a way of distributing weight unfairly, placing the heaviest loads on the smallest shoulders. Emma, you know what? Tomas said, making a decision that felt both natural and terrifying. My daughter Sophie and I were planning to go to the library this Saturday to pick out some new books. She's about your age, and she loves meeting new friends. Would you and your mom like to come with us? Emma's face lit up with the first genuine smile Tomas had seen from her. Really, Sophie wouldn't mind having me there. Sophie would love it, Tomas assured her, thinking about his daughter's frequent complaints about being the only kid in their small social circle. And afterwards, maybe we could get ice cream, and you could tell Sophie about your favorite books. I have to ask my mom first, Emma said, but her excitement was barely contained. She's always telling me I need to make more friends, but it's hard when kids like Marcus tell everyone not to play with me. Well, Sophie doesn't know Marcus, and she definitely doesn't listen to kids who say mean things about other people's families, Tomas said. She's pretty good at making up her own mind about who she wants to be friends with. That evening, Tomas found himself standing outside Lisa's apartment door, second-guessing his impulse to get involved in their lives. He had learned through hard experience that good intentions could lead to complicated situations, and he wasn't entirely sure what he hoped to accomplish by extending this invitation. But Emma's tears that first night at the diner had lodged themselves in his memory, and he couldn't shake the feeling that sometimes the universe placed people in each other's paths for reasons that wouldn't become clear until much later. Lisa answered the door looking harried but curious, probably wondering why her neighbor was visiting during what was clearly a busy dinner hour. Behind her, Tomas could see Emma bouncing on her toes with barely suppressed excitement, obviously having already shared the library invitation with her mother. Emma tells me you invited us to the library this weekend, Lisa said, her tone carefully neutral. That's very kind, but I don't want to impose on your family time. You wouldn't be imposing, Tomas replied honestly. Sophie's been asking for a friend to hang out with, and Emma seems like exactly the kind of kid who would be a good influence on her. Besides, the library has this great children's section that's way more fun when there's more than one kid to explore it. Lisa studied his face with the careful attention of someone who had learned to be suspicious of offers that seemed too good to be true. "Why?" she asked finally. "I mean, why would you want to spend your Saturday with a single mom and her daughter who you barely know?" The directness of the question caught Tomas off guard, but he appreciated her honesty. "Because 3 years ago, Sophie and I were exactly where you and Emma are now," he said. "And the people who showed us kindness during that time made all the difference between feeling completely alone and feeling like we might actually make it through intact." Something in Lisa's expression softened, and Tomas could see her internal debate between accepting help and maintaining the independence that had probably been her primary survival strategy since Emma's father disappeared. "Okay," she said finally. "Saturday afternoon?" "Perfect," Tomas said, surprised by how relieved he felt at her acceptance. 2 o'clock at the main branch? As he walked back to his own apartment, Tomas wondered what exactly he was setting in motion. He had no grand plan for fixing Emma's relationship with her absent father or solving Lisa's financial struggles. But sometimes, he reflected, the most important help came not from dramatic interventions but from simple acts of inclusion, from the recognition that no one had to face their challenges completely alone. Saturday would be just the beginning of discovering what kind of difference small kindnesses could make in lives that had been shaped by too much disappointment and not enough hope. The library outing had been a revelation. Sophie and Emma had bonded immediately over their shared love of fantasy novels and their mutual disdain for vegetables, creating an instant friendship that reminded Tomas why children were so much better at seeing past surface differences than adults. The afternoon had stretched into evening, with both families sharing pizza at Tony's Pizzeria while the girls planned elaborate adventures for their newly acquired library books. For the first time in months, Lisa had laughed freely, her shoulders losing their permanent tension as she watched Emma animated and happy in a way that seemed almost foreign. "I had forgotten she could be like this," Lisa had confided to Tomas as they watched the girls debate whether dragons or unicorns would make better pets. "She's been so serious lately, so worried about everything. I started to think I had imagined the silly, joyful kid she used to be." That conversation had stayed with Tomas through the following weeks, as their families naturally gravitated towards shared dinners and weekend activities. Emma began spending afternoons at their apartment while Lisa worked late shifts at the clinic, and Sophie finally had the constant companion she had been craving. The arrangement worked beautifully until the phone call that changed everything. It was a Thursday evening in late October when Lisa's phone rang during what had become their weekly family game night. Tomas was helping Sophie with a particularly challenging Monopoly transaction, while Emma counted her colorful money with intense concentration, tongue poking out slightly in the way that indicated serious mathematical calculation. The shrill ring of Lisa's cell phone cut through their comfortable chatter, and something about her sharp intake of breath when she looked at the caller ID made everyone freeze. "It's him," Lisa whispered, her face draining of color. "It's Michael." Emma's head snapped up from her, money counting, hope and terror warring in her expression. She had stopped asking about her father's absence weeks ago, but Tomas could see that she had never stopped waiting for this moment. "Daddy?" she breathed, the single word carrying 3 years of accumulated longing. Lisa's hands shook as she answered the phone, walking quickly into the kitchen in a futile attempt to keep the conversation private in Tomas's small apartment. But voices carried, and within moments it became clear that Michael wasn't calling with apologies or promises to be better. He was calling because he needed something. "What do you mean you listed Emma as your dependent on your taxes?" Lisa's voice rose to a pitch that made Sophie flinch. "You haven't contributed a single dollar to her care in over a year, Michael. You can't just claim her when it's convenient for your tax situation." Emma's face crumpled as the reality of the call became apparent. This wasn't her father calling because he missed her or wanted to be part of her life. This was her father calling because he needed to use her existence for his own financial benefit. Tomas watched helplessly as the little girl who had been giggling over Monopoly money moments before transformed back into the broken child he had first encountered at the diner. "I want to talk to her," they heard Michael say loud enough that his voice carried into the living room. "Put Emma on the phone." "Absolutely not," Lisa replied with a fierceness that surprised everyone. "You don't get to pop in and out of her life whenever it suits your purposes. She's finally starting to heal from the last time you promised to visit and then just disappeared. She's my daughter too, Lisa. I have rights." The casual way Michael claimed paternal rights while having abdicated all paternal responsibilities ignited something dangerous in Tomas's chest. He had watched Emma's slow progress toward happiness over the past 2 months, had seen her learn to laugh again and trust that adults could be counted on to show up when they said they would. The idea that Michael could shatter that fragile progress with a single phone call felt like witnessing someone deliberately break something beautiful and irreplaceable. Rights? Lisa's voice cracked with exhaustion and fury. You have rights? What about her rights, Michael? What about her right to have a father who doesn't use her for tax breaks and then vanish for months at a time? Emma slipped off her chair and moved toward the kitchen, drawn by some combination of hope and masochistic curiosity that Tomas recognized from his own childhood experiences with disappointment. He caught her gently by the shoulders, kneeling down to meet her eyes. Emma, sweetheart, why don't you and Sophie go to her room and work on that puzzle we started yesterday? He suggested softly. But that's my daddy, Emma whispered, tears already flowing. Maybe if I talk to him, I can make him understand that I've been really good. Maybe I can convince him to love me. The heartbreaking logic of a child who believed that love was something that had to be earned through perfect behavior made Tomas's throat tighten. Oh, honey, he said, pulling her into a hug that she melted into with desperate gratitude. You don't have to convince anyone to love you. You're already lovable, exactly as you are. Then why doesn't he want me? Emma sobbed against his shoulder, the question that had been haunting her for years finally exploding out of the careful box where she had tried to keep it contained. In the kitchen, Lisa's conversation had devolved into the kind of argument that revealed years of accumulated resentment and broken promises. She asks about you every single day, Michael. Every day. And I have to watch her heart break a little more each time I have to explain why you can't be bothered to call or visit or even send a birthday card. I've been dealing with my own stuff, Lisa. You have no idea what kind of pressure I'm under. Your own stuff? Lisa's voice reached a level of incredulity that made Sophie wince from the hallway. She's 7 years old, Michael. She doesn't care about your pressure. She just wants her father to act like she matters. Tomas found himself standing up, Emma still clinging to him, and walking toward the kitchen with a calm determination that surprised him. He had spent months watching this family heal, had invested his heart in their well-being, and he wasn't going to stand by while Michael's selfishness undid all of that progress. Let me talk to him, Tomas said quietly to Lisa, who looked at him with surprise and something that might have been relief. Who is that? Michael's voice came through the phone speaker with suspicious hostility. Who are you letting around my daughter, Lisa? Someone who actually shows up, Lisa replied without missing a beat, handing the phone to Tomas. Tomas accepted the phone with the same steady calm he brought to diffusing kitchen crises during busy dinner rushes. Michael, this is Tomas. I'm a friend of Lisa and Emma's. I don't know who you think you are, but this is a family matter, Michael said, his voice carrying the aggressive defensiveness of someone who knew he was in the wrong but wasn't prepared to admit it. You're absolutely right, Tomas replied evenly. This is about family, which is why I'm trying to understand how a father could go months without contacting his daughter and then call demanding tax benefits. You don't know anything about my situation. I know enough, Tomas said, looking down at Emma, who was watching his face with the intensity of someone whose world hung in the balance. I know that your daughter cries herself to sleep, wondering why she's not good enough for her father to love. I know that your ex-girlfriend works 16-hour days trying to provide for a child you helped create but won't help support. And I know that Emma is the most amazing, smart, funny, kind little girl who deserves so much better than a father who treats her like a tax write-off. The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough that Tomas wondered if Michael had hung up. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a defensive anger that revealed how accurately Tomas's words had hit their target. You have no right to judge me. You don't know what it's like. Actually, Tomas said, his voice still calm but edged with steel. I know exactly what it's like. My ex-wife left when Sophie was 5. The difference is, when someone abandons their child, they don't get to pop back up and claim parental privileges when it's convenient. Emma is not your tax deduction, Michael. She's a little girl who needs consistency and love, not another adult who disappoints her. I want to see her, Michael said suddenly, and something in his tone made Tomas's blood run cold. "Why now?" Tomas asked. "What's really going on, Michael?" The pause that followed confirmed Tomas's worst suspicions. This wasn't about reconnecting with Emma or making amends for years of neglect. This was about something else entirely, something that would hurt Emma even more than the ongoing abandonment she had learned to expect. Whatever Michael's real motivation, Tomas was certain it had nothing to do with being a better father, and everything to do with what he could get from the situation. The truth came out 3 days later when Michael showed up unannounced at Lisa's apartment, desperate and clearly struggling with substance abuse issues that explained his erratic behavior over the past year. He needed money for rehab, he claimed, but more than that, he needed to document his relationship with Emma to satisfy a court-mandated family reunification program that was his only alternative to jail time for drug-related charges. Tomas arrived to find Lisa barricading her front door while Emma hid in the bathroom, sobbing with the kind of terror that children experience when their worst fears are confirmed. Michael wasn't there because he had suddenly developed paternal instincts. He was there because he needed Emma to be a prop in his attempt to convince a judge that he was trying to rebuild his life. "Emma doesn't want to see you," Lisa called through the door, her voice shaking with protective fury. "You can't just force your way back into her life when you need something." "I'm her father," Michael shouted, pounding on the door with increasing desperation. "I have legal rights. The court said I need to document contact with my kid, and that's what I'm going to do." Tomas stepped between Michael and the door, his presence immediately shifting the dynamic. Over the past months, he had discovered that his calm demeanor and physical presence had a way of de-escalating situations that threatened to spiral out of control. "Michael, you need to step back and think about what you're doing," he said evenly. "This has nothing to do with you," Michael snarled, but Tomas could see the exhaustion and desperation beneath his aggression. This was a man who had hit bottom and was grasping for anything that might keep him from falling further. "Actually, it has everything to do with me," Tomas replied. "Emma is part of my family now. Sophie considers her a sister. Lisa is important to me. So when you show up here demanding things you haven't earned and scaring a little girl who's already been through enough, it becomes very much my business." The words surprised Tomas as much as they seemed to surprise Michael. Over the months of shared dinners and weekend adventures, he had fallen in love with Lisa's quiet strength and Emma's resilient spirit without fully acknowledging it to himself. They had become his family in all the ways that mattered, bound together by choice and daily commitment rather than biology or legal documents. Michael's face contorted with an ugly mixture of jealousy and rage. "So you're playing house with my family now? Is that what this is about? You think you can just replace me?" "Nobody replaced you, Michael," Tomas said with devastating simplicity. "You were never here to begin with." The truth of that statement seemed to hit Michael like a physical blow. For a moment, his aggressive posture crumbled, revealing the broken man underneath. "I know I messed up," he said, his voice cracking. "But she's my daughter. I'm supposed to matter to her." "Then start acting like her father," Tomas replied. "Not when you need something from her, but every single day. Show up for school plays and scraped knees and homework struggles. Be there when she has nightmares about why her daddy doesn't love her. Prove that you can be consistent and reliable before you demand to be important." Michael stared at Tomas for a long moment, and something in his expression suggested that he was seeing his own failures clearly for the first time. "What if it's too late?" he asked quietly. "What if I've already ruined everything?" "It's not too late," Tomas said, surprising himself with his compassion for this man who had caused so much pain. "But it's going to take time and work and proving yourself over and over again. Emma deserves better than promises that disappear when things get difficult." The confrontation ended not with dramatic reconciliation but with Michael walking away, promising to get clean and come back when he could offer Emma stability instead of chaos. Whether he would follow through remained to be seen, but for the first time he seemed to understand the magnitude of what he had lost and what he would need to do to earn it back. That evening, as Emma finally emerged from the bathroom and curled up between Tomas and Lisa on the couch, she asked the question that had been haunting her since the phone call. "Why doesn't it feel good when Daddy says he wants to see me?" Tomas chose his words carefully, understanding that his answer would shape how Emma viewed relationships for years to come. Because sometimes people say they want to see us for their own reasons, not because they actually care about how we feel. Real love feels safe and happy, not scary and confusing. Like how you and Mama make me feel, Emma asked, unconsciously using the word that revealed how completely she had accepted this new family structure. Exactly like that, Tomas confirmed, pulling her closer while Lisa wiped away tears of relief and gratitude. 6 months later, Emma asked a different question while they worked together in the small garden behind their new house. "Tomas, would it be okay if I called you Daddy?" she said, not looking up from the tomato plants they were staking together. Tomas knelt down beside her in the rich soil, his heart full of the quiet joy that came from love freely given and received. "Emma, there is nothing in this world that would make me happier," he said, watching as her face lit up with the uncomplicated delight of a child who finally understood that she was exactly where she belonged. The question that had broken his heart that first night at the diner had been answered not with words but with presence, not with explanations but with the daily choice to show up and stay and love without conditions. Emma had learned that fathers weren't just the men who helped create you, but the ones who chose to build a life with you every single day. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.